Dr. Shakiera Causey. I am a daughter of New Bern, North Carolina. Um, I am an HBCU alumni. I am an eldest daughter. We probably will touch on that a little bit as we go throughout this discussion today. Um, and I am a daughter of the American South. My family is rooted in Eastern North Carolina. Um, I come from Craven Terrace Projects, like Dr. Edward Bell, my
Yes.
first mentor, um, who saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. So I'm happy to be here today. I am an educator. I am also a research scientist. I am a people's and community advocate that does advocacy.
Proud of you. So let's get right into our discussion. I want to talk about initially vocabulary.
Okay.
Uh, so let's talk about the word intersectionality and what does it truly mean when we hear that word intersectionality?
Okay. Thank you. I just want to say thank you in advance for all of the questions. Very thoughtful, and I'm glad we're going to be able to unpack these a little bit today. So, as most people who are entrenched in this line of work know, Kimberly Crenshaw created the word intersectionality. For those who may be novices to the terminology, when Kimberly Crenshaw first talked about intersectionality, she wasn't using it as a buzzword. She was giving us a lens through which we try to understand people's lived experiences, specifically Black women. She showed how Black women could be and have been erased, right? In both feminist, like white feminist and anti-racist spaces, because the systems of racism and sexism were not being seen together. And the Combahee River Collective said it, I think, best back in the 70s, that systems of oppression are interlocking and layered. And one of my Black feminist scholar mothers, Patricia Hill Collins, referred to this as the matrix of domination. So, intersectionality is about seeing people in their wholeness, right? And I could, I'll use myself from as personal experience. I am Black and a woman and have grown up in the South and I identify and it was raised as a Christian and all these other things. And what intersectionality acknowledges is that a Black woman isn't just Black on Monday and then a woman on Tuesday, right? Those realities overlap every single day, and every single day, those different identities or intersecting identities shape your unique challenges and also your unique strengths. So it's not just about the barriers and obstacles that you overcome, but it also informs what protective factors and strategies that you use to get through all of those structural and systemic things that try to keep you oppressed. So intersectionality pushes us away from one-dimensional thinking and toward understanding a fuller truth about people's lived experiences.
So how did the word become, for lack of a better word, a boogeyman of sorts? Because
And it has. It's kind of like DEI, like people
right,
tense up.
right, right.
Um, oh gosh. So I think there are many things at play. One of the reasons that people get nervous about the word is that naming intersectionality, just like naming in DEI, means you have to name that there is a hierarchical nature to power, right? If you don't want to acknowledge that despite what you're sold about equity, equality in this country, that people, regardless of how much hard work they do, will still be at lower positions in this hierarchy of power. So we live in this, culture and society that feigns that idealism and meritocracy exist, despite everything we know to the contrary. So that's one issue because specifically American Christian nationalism, doesn't want to name power in the hierarchy because it sells us this story that there's equality for all and you just need to bootstrap it and then you will achieve this American dream. And folks in power don't usually like the mirror held up because then they have to acknowledge that all of that is BS, right?
Mhm.
Um, uh, Bell Hooks, another um, scholar that has informed the way I, exist and think about the world, warned us that not only Christian nationalism, but also feminism gets watered down because it just comes about equality instead of dismantling domination. And Audre Lorde, who we are, my colleagues and I, who are part of the Griots Nest Collective, are highlighting this month in our Legacy Spotlight. Audre Lorde said it even more simply than that when she said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house."
Mm,
So
mm.
this
That's
resist
profound.
yes.
Yes.
So the resistance to intersectionality, it's not really about the word itself, but it is about what it asks of us. It asks us to stop and have a moment of introspection. It asks us to move beyond the surface level diversity and take on a deeper, harder conversation about what justice looks like. And people don't want to do that. Right, in the current context, you have people trying to just do a version of revisionist history, but also trying to erase the horrors that this country has committed against people and bodies of color. So if you can't have an honest conversation about the inequity that exists, then how do you progress towards what restorative justice looks like? You don't get there.
Right, because you said it's difficult having the willpower and the desire to dismantle a system. It takes effort and working and lots of courage.
And and also recognizing that and this is why our journalists are important, our historians are important, because when you try to erase history or revise it, then you're bound to repeat it. So we're living in this moment where, um, the past becomes prologue if we aren't careful. And we've seen what the atrocities can look like
Mhm.
when, authoritarianism comes to power, when fascism comes to power. So if you can't acknowledge the ugly, you can't get to the beautiful.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's the moment that we're in right now in this country. So we gotta we gotta acknowledge what got us here if we're gonna get to the other side. And
Okay.
intersectionality um is part of getting to the other side. Like understanding what that is part of getting to the other side.
The others, do you think we will get and stay at the other side?
I think that most things are cyclical in nature and human history, but I do think that the majority of people in this country want to get to the other side.
Mhm.
I think the nature of this power structure is definitely rooted in capitalism. So you have people with all of this wealth at the top who are the minority. You're talking about, maybe 5 to 10% of people who have been able to pretty much crowdsource lobbyists, corporations to not have to enact the actual will of the people who they're supposed to represent. So I think that there's always going to be that resistance, but I think that what we are witnessing now is that people are rising in their power and saying, um, you are here as an employee of us. And if you're not going to do that, then you're going to receive a pink slip. I think that there's been a lot of status quo of people kind of resting on their laurels.
Mhm.
But we're in this moment now that people have had enough. Even if you don't have the same political views and lens, I think we're in this moment where this administration, people in power, are so corrupt, are so ignorant, are so void of compassion that even people who maybe have different perspectives are coming together in agreement that
Mhm.
this cannot stand if we are going to continue as a country, and as people who um, actually embody what we say we embody about humanity and caring about one another. So I think we're in this moment where people who would not likely be allies are becoming allies.
Mhm. Yes. All
Now, how
right.
long that takes, who knows? Now,
How long
you
it
and I
takes
might may
and how
not be
long
here
it
to see it,
lasts.
but
Right.
change takes a while. Sometimes it takes generations, but I think there's been a catalytic movement
Mhm, mhm.
with the level of just dissatisfaction with the direction this country is headed in.
Okay, good. All right. So we're still exploring vocabulary. I think it's critical. So let's talk about religiosity. How does deep religious commitment shape a person's beliefs, behaviors, and their political positions?
Yeah. I firstly, I feel like I have to lead in, and this is not even in the little notes that I've written, but I think the irony of how this informs political perspectives is that you very much have this conservative party who aligns itself with Christian nationalism and being Christians, right? However, on a policy level, all of the the reduction in resources and cuts and all of those policy level things, the fiscal resources and programs that are linked to social services programs, right? That help your neighbor, that help people who have
Mhm,
less.
mhm,
Um, this same political party who kind of touts itself as the Christian pro-life party slashes and eliminates programs that
mhm, mhm,
actually improve the quality of life of people, which is not aligned with the principles of Christianity at all. So I want to start with that. Like, let's be clear about politics right now is very much enmeshed in religion, but it's for capital gain. It's signaling, but in practice, it doesn't actually align
mhm.
with the principles of the religion itself. Now that I've said that, let me give some context to what my experience has been, and how religiosity kind of shapes the way we move throughout the world. And I'm speaking as a Southern Black girl again. I've only spent my entire life in the southeastern United States. So for many Black communities, faith is the backbone. It is where we have found resilience and joy. It's where we have also found survival. Um, Alice Walker called it womanist, a spirituality that's rooted in Black women's everyday lives. Womanist theologians like Katie Cannon and Dolores Williams took that further, saying that faith has to also be accountable to justice. Again, like the the theme throughout all of this is justice for wrongs done. But the challenge for this particular circumstance is that when religion is lived in only one dimension, it can harden into rigidity. And instead of bringing people together, it's weaponized. And we see that. We see that in practice as you have these elected officials trying to shove different religious tenets down our throats, trying to put it in school systems. I live in Louisiana where we had I feel like it's still caught up in court now where they were trying to put the Ten Commandments in classrooms as if everyone um in the public school system is a Christian, which is something they wouldn't do. You wouldn't put, scripts from the Quran in the classroom. So this separation of church and state, which is in the act, in our Constitution, is something that gets tossed out the window, depending upon what political leverage it might offer um, individuals that want to stay in power. So when it comes to religiosity, the risk isn't necessarily faith itself, but it's when we refuse to see that truth and justice are big enough to hold multiple perspectives. That means respecting that your spiritual belief may be different than my own. That doesn't mean that your experiences should be minimized. That doesn't mean that your viewpoints and ideologies are not valid. It just means that they are different. And as a little black girl who grew up in a small Southern Baptist church, and this is salient now because now you have a Supreme Court considering overturning same-sex marriage. I remember the rhetoric um, that you could do almost anything and be forgiven in the black church. You could be an adulterer, you could be a thief, a murderer, a pedophile, and just repent. You could be anything except be homosexual. Being gay, and this is from the pulpit,
Mhm.
was, a one-way ticket to damnation and proverbial hell. And I'm saying that this was impactful to me to hear, and I'm a cisgender heterosexual woman.
Mhm.
So I can only imagine, the betrayal, the shame, and all the conflicting emotions, and
Mhm.
even abandonment
Mhm.
that people who are not heterosexual, people who are not, binary gender conforming, growing up in church, hearing those messages. So religiosity for some can undermine the inconvenient truth for Black folks, especially, that none of us are free unless all of us are free. And that all Black lives matter, not just straight lives, not just binary gender conforming ones. Um, and this is also salient when you think about the rate at which Black trans people are murdered and no one investigates, right? No one files missing persons reports. And oftentimes, in social media circles, people almost justify the snuffing out of their lives because of their identities. So, what's so important and valuable to me about, um, Black feminists that raised me into the scholar I am is that Black feminist theology pushes us to keep faith, but to also ground it in liberation and not control of people's lives and people's actions.
Thank you. Well said. So, in seeking a balance, how can we honor our faith, our identity, and our personal belief in such a pluralistic society, day by day by day? What can we do? Or
Uh,
or what can they do?
we can all do, I feel we can all do a little something. So I think one thing we can do is not water down our beliefs. We can show up authentically, show up in your truth. That means holding your beliefs with depth and compassion. Back to what I just said, a few moments ago, is that understanding that just because a person's beliefs are different from your own
Mhm.
doesn't mean you don't try to understand and have compassion about what their experiences are. Um, Patricia Hill Collins calls this an ethic of community and accountability. And in the same vein, Bell Hooks always talked about and discussed love as a political force. And my favorite, again, Audre Lorde reminded us that difference is it's not something to fear, it's a source of creativity. So, like, what does that look like day to day? It looks like listening before debating. It looks like being curious instead of being
Mhm.
judgmental. It looks like standing firmly in what grounds you, while also extending grace to those who believe differently or who have different experiences from you. And I think that that's how we thrive in a pluralistic society. You can have conviction, but you can also have compassion for working together and coming on one accord for what you want the world in your community to look like. So it's
Great.
it's compromise.
Compromising.
It's
So,
authentic, it's authenticity and compromise.
right, to show up as your true self.
Yes.
Here's what I tell students and others as well. You cannot hide from yourself because wherever you go, you always will show up. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
some people try not to be authentic. You know, you're going to show up, authentic or not. And
Mm-hmm.
so good points. I appreciate that. So let's segue and talk about health equity. In your work and the things that you're doing, what are we missing when it comes to health equity, when it comes to ensuring fair and just health outcomes for all people? And you just mentioned some social identities earlier. So what
Mm-hmm.
must we do better?
I think that people still, after all this time, still have a misunderstanding and conflate
Mhm,
equality and equity. They still confuse the two,
mhm, mhm,
right? So you have people who still think about equality, which is essentially like giving everyone the same thing, when while equity gives people what they actually need. So if you give everyone the same thing, but one group of people has a head start, then that's not going to get us at the finish line at the same
mhm,
time, right? So I think that's one hard truth is that people don't understand the difference. Um, I also think that part of it is that people think that health is just about individual behavior and choices. And it's beyond doctor's visits, right? It's also
mhm.
about systems and the care that you receive in those systems, care you do or don't receive. Let me clarify. Um, so part of Arlene Geronimus's weathering hypothesis is that racism literally wears our bodies down on a
Mhm,
genetic molecular level. So when you have reproductive policies that police Black women's bodies or tell people that they can't receive gender affirming care, what you witness is this not just degeneration of health outcomes and quality of life, but it also impacts mortality. And we're witnessing that now
mhm,
with Black maternal mortality, which has been declared a public health crisis. Um, with Black women are their mortality rate is 2.5 times higher than white women and 4 times higher than Asian women in the United States, where giving birth for Black women is almost just as dangerous as heart disease or getting in a car accident. And these things are preventable. So when you think about health equity, you have to talk about what impact medical racism has
mhm,
on health equity.
mhm,
Um, Part of that is linked to medical distrust. We're familiar with the Tuskegee experiment. Harriet Washington, another Black feminist scholar, reminded us that a lot of this mistrust is linked directly to medical exploitation, and it still shapes mistrust today. We saw it with COVID-19 vaccinations, right? People, I don't know about that. I heard people talking about 5G and people putting implants tracking you, and that's why they didn't want to get the COVID vaccine. So the mistrust for people of color, Black folks, especially in this country, is rooted in being exploited
Right.
in research and science. So one of the things that we need to think about is, what are we missing? We're missing the courage to move past this kind of standardized one size fits all fix. When it comes to health equity, you can't talk about health equity and trying to improve people's holistic quality of life if you don't address all the social determinants of health and those systemic barriers that perpetuate health disparities. So you got to address housing, you got to address wages, you got to address racism, lived experiences, and all of those things, because all of those things impact our physical, emotional, mental, and physical health. And we need to stop having this approach of doing things to communities like we know best, and actually engaging with them using a more participatory model and doing things with communities. That means asking them what their priorities are, what resources are important to them to have, instead of us coming down. And I come from an academic research background originally. So, not coming down with this kind of patriarchal, um, white supremacist approach where we see that you all have these high chronic illness disparity rates, and this is what the research shows works, so we're going to apply this here in your context, and it may not even be what's contributing in that particular neighborhood or community, or it may not be what they're concerned with. Maybe they're not concerned with if they can get access to, a fresh piece of lettuce. Maybe they're just trying to make rent next month. So that's why it's important to to talk to the people who you're trying to work with, and not just study them like they are lab rats.
Good, great. So, as you think about public policy, what keeps you up? What disturbs your spirit, so to speak?
What doesn't disturb my spirit is a better question. This was a tough question because I was like, this could go on till tomorrow.
Right.
Um, I think what keeps me up at night is the gap between what we espouse our values are on paper in this country and the policies that we actually pass.
Hmm.
This kind of lends back to what I was speaking about with the religiosity. On paper, the United States presents itself as a meritocracy Christian nation. And then you have people who get in power who pretty much tell you, if you are a person of color or poor or not from money or an immigrant or refugee, to go in a corner and die. On paper, we talk about equity and justice and well-being, but in practice, policies they actually reinforce inequity. Women, girls, and LGBTQ plus folks of color get left out of conversations all the time when it comes to policing and safety. A prime example of that was Kimberly Crenshaw's Say Her Name campaign, that was specifically lifting up state violence against Black women and trans Black women. Um, there are other reproductive justice advocates like Loretta Ross, who, reminded us that freedom means more than the right to not have children. It's also the right to have them and raise them in safe communities. So it's beyond um this debate about what pro-life and pro-choice is. It's like what happens after we get here? What happens after children
Right,
get here? And that's another
right.
thing that is a critique of conservatives. They want you to have children, but then they don't want to offer any support or resources when the children get here. They want to cut SNAP, they want to cut Medicaid, they want to cut WIC. Um, they want to over police black and brown neighborhoods. They don't want you to have access to birth control or women's wellness exams. So, like, what does it look like in practice when you're saying you're pro-life? And I think on a policy level, we don't live up to what we say we believe on paper. Um, the Combahee River Collective said it best to me, um, because their tenet is that if Black women were free, because we're at the bottom. Like, if Black women were free, then everyone would have an opportunity to be free. And that's the policy test that I keep coming back to is who is consistently left out and who gets free. And that if Black women who are at the bottom of the totem pole by health outcomes, by wage disparity, if you think about it, um, if Black women can achieve some sort of liberation, then everyone else will be brought up as well because we've always been at the bottom. So when policy can begin to align with the principles we espouse, then we may be closer to that, progressive ideal that we aspire to in this country.
This has been an insightful and enlightening conversation. But before we end, I do want to revisit again intersectionality as a takeaway. What can we take away from understanding intersectionality? If you have some parting words on that term.
Yeah, I think I would just close with just understanding that we are all layered individuals with nuanced life experiences. And even if I could break it down even further, even for children growing up in the same household, I'm the eldest of three. And while we are all are Black, my sister and I have the same gender, my brother doesn't. We all grew up in Little New Bern, North Carolina. But even the relationship and experiences that we had in New Bern, North Carolina, and the interactions we had with our parents is different. Even the relationships that we have with one another are different. So that is also a form of intersectionality. It's just acknowledging and recognizing that even if on the surface people look the same or have the same identities, that what they encounter as they kind of move through this thing called life, it's going to be different. And that's going to inform why they believe what they believe, how they show up, um, how they are resistant to certain ideas and perspectives. And one way that we can get to a better place of understanding is just um, acknowledging the difference. It doesn't mean that you have to necessarily agree or spend time and energy debating who's right, but understanding that that different perspective doesn't negate your own. And it's not a battle of, whose truth is the most paramount. It's just honoring that we all show up and are impacted by those identities every single day in different ways. And if we can do that, then we can move forward together.
Sitting here thinking about the 13-year-old girl that I met some years ago. And not only that, thinking about the dissertation of that 13-year-old girl at the university, UNCG. I was sitting in the audience listening to her defend. And I'm listening to her right now, and I'm thinking, wow. As I say to my son sometime, girl, you smart. So it's just it's just so uplifting to see you and to hear you. And I have many times, but tonight it resonates different. And I am so proud of you. I am just gleaming and beaming. And so, well done. So, anything else before we end this segment?
No, as always, thank you for having me. Thank you for always thinking of me.
Sure,
Thank you
sure.
for uplifting me. Thank you for always showing up.
Hmm.
I always talk about the village and you always find me. I don't care
Hmm.
where I am. I've, moved around over the course of the decades,
Hmm.
but you always reach out and tap me when I need to be, part of the village for
Hmm.
other communities and for younger folks, because,
Hmm.
I'm not a spring chicken anymore.
Hmm.
So I appreciate that um, our cords have continued to be attached after all this time, and you have really been a force in my life, and I appreciate you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Causey, and I will be in touch. And as I say on my
Thank
videos, be well.
Thank you.
Sure. Bye bye.